One of the most fundamental concepts of Strapi is controllers. We've talked about the different endpoints that Strapi creates for our content. The endpoints are kind of like the where of the application. The roles and permissions plugin handles the who of the application. The models define what we're working with, and controllers define how. So how the logic is actually going to execute. Controllers are the C in the MVC model. So we've now covered two parts of the MVC model just with Strapi. Strapi is taking care of both the models and the controllers for our applications. Let's head on over to the Strapi documentation and see what they have to say about controllers. Here I am on strapi.io. On the left, under Concepts, Controllers. And they say that controllers are JavaScript files containing sets of methods called actions that you can access by requesting a specific route. Here you can see a basic example where a GET request to /hello would send back hello world. Okay, we'll keep talking more about this, but let's scroll down. And here it says that anytime we create a new content type, a new set of controllers is going to be created. Strapi builds all of the default controllers for us, but then gives us a file that we can use to extend those controllers or to add custom ones of our own. That's sort of why I tend to think of controllers as custom logic living at endpoints that we can use to interact with the content in our application. If we scroll down here, we can see all of the default controllers created for us. So there's a find one. So this is the list of all of them. So when we make our request to localhost port 1337/articles, this is actually how it goes and finds all of our articles. It executes this find controller, which goes and it uses Strapi services, which we will get into in, again, the next couple videos. But essentially, these are just other functions that Strapi has built that allow searching for a specific restaurant query or simply listing all of the available restaurants. So this is the logic that's executed that finds our articles and gives us this request. So that is what's actually going on behind the scenes. And you can see the same logic, or not the same logic, but the same concept for all of the other controllers as well. So here for find one, we are looking for an ID in our params. So this is the query parameters. So what information is being sent with the request. So the find one controller expects to be sent an ID, and it uses that ID to find one restaurant with that ID. Okay, and then it returns this back. And we'll go over more about the specifics of this syntax. Right now, I just want you to be aware of the fact that this is how you control the logic happening at those endpoints, and that you can also not only extend the default functionality, but also add custom functionality and controllers as well. Those are actually two really big and powerful concepts of Strapi. Being able to extend the default functionality and the default models and controllers, as well as being able to completely set up our own custom ones. This allows us to really have a great base foundation to build out any of the features that we could need for handling just about any logic for our application and all the content within Strapi. Let's take a look at the update function. Okay, so whenever you want to update a restaurant in this example, but a content type in general, if you want to update that content type, the update route and controller expects an ID with your request, and it uses that ID to here update the entry with the information that you pass it. What's interesting to note here is that there's no specific is owner policy going on. So there's nothing in here making sure that you're the person supposed to be updating this restaurant. If you simply have the ID and you have the permission to access the endpoint where this controller is hosted, and you pass the controller the right ID, then the restaurant will be updated. And there's no default logic checking to make sure that you're the user supposed to be doing that. That's a really common piece of functionality though. So if we go here on the side down to guides, we can actually see create is owner policy is right at the top. So let's go ahead and click on that. And like it says, this guide will explain how to restrict content editing to authors only. Okay, so in this example, they have an article like we did in our example. And if we scroll down, we'll see the first example shows how they customize the create controller to automatically set whatever authenticated user makes the request as the author of the article. So to customize this, the main concept you need to understand is that you need to take the implementation of the core controller and then extend it. Okay, so essentially what they do, the core controllers are what we just went over. And so here they take the create controller and then you will copy it. You'll copy this logic, actually just the logic right here, and then you would copy this into your controller file, and then you can go ahead and add whatever code you want, and then Strapi will use your newly defined version. Okay, we'll take a look at how to do this in just a second, but for now let's go back over to this example, and you can see here that once they've copied that over, all they do is add a line right here and right here for each different case that takes the context, which we'll talk more about later, but this has information about the request and the response for this controller, and it finds the state.user, so the user who's making this request, and grabs the ID of this user. And it goes ahead and sets that as the author for the article being created. Okay, again, we'll get into the specifics of this later, and we'll be doing all of this ourselves, so don't worry. I just want you to be thinking about the fact that this is possible to extend the default controllers, to extend the default functionality. Okay, and here if we scroll down, you see the example for restricting the update, so only the author of that article can be the one to edit it. So here is the create controller that we had just modified before. And now below we have the update controller with some extra logic that first goes and searches for the article based on the author of the user making the request. And if that article is not found, so if the article is not found on the user who's making the request, it's going to return an unauthorized error code. Okay, and that will ensure that only the person who created this article will be able to edit it. So let's actually go ahead and open up our code editor and let's make a controller for ourselves. Okay, so remember to open up the backend folder and then open up API and then our article, and then we have the controllers folder. Before we were working with our models. Now let's take a look at the controllers article.js. This is where you would copy in any of the default controllers that you would want to extend. But let's go ahead, and I just want to create our own new controller so that we can test out and see how this is working. Okay, so let's follow one of the examples that they give, and let's create a hello world. So all the functions in here have to be async functions. So that'll be the first thing we start off with. And let's call this hello and open this up. Our function is going to expect the context to be passed in, but we won't do anything with that yet. Let's just go ahead and return hello world. Okay, so we can go ahead and save this, but that's not everything that we need to do to set this up. And actually, I think if we save that, it'll start to restart our server, but it won't work correctly yet because we actually need to also go and open up the config folder right above controllers and select routes.json. Okay, and this defines all of the endpoints and how they match up to the different controllers. Okay, so here we see the endpoint / articles and the controller that handles it, article.find. So we need to define one of those for the new controller that we just created. So I'll just go ahead and copy this. Let's paste it right here. We'll leave it as a get request, but let's make it at /articles/hello. And then for handler, we can go ahead and select article.hello, because that is what we named the function right here in our controller. Okay, so article, because that is the controller that we're defining this for, and then hello, the name of the function that we defined. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that now, and our server is going to restart again, so wait for this to load back up. And now let's go back to our Strapi admin dashboard, and because we just created a new controller, remember that all controllers by default for security considerations are inaccessible. Okay, so we have to explicitly turn on the permissions for it, and that includes the custom controllers that we create. So let's go ahead and open up our roles and permissions, and let's edit the roles for our public user. Okay, and if we scroll down here under article, we now have hello popping up. So we can select hello, we can see it's bound to /articles/hello, and it will execute the hello controller. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that. Now we should be good. Let's go over here, go to /articles/hello, and check that out. We have a nice hello world sent right back to us. So I hope this example gave you a good understanding of what is going on here and how Strapi is actually executing different logic at these endpoints, and how we are able to control and customize those endpoints and functionality ourselves. So this is a really fundamental concept of Strapi. This is something we're going to be working a lot with in the course. So if it doesn't make perfect sense yet, that's okay, but hopefully the concept is at least starting to become clear.